Follow what I'm saying? Jesus is able to feed us when we're hungry. But then the story goes on to say that the disciples were sent, or Jesus sent the disciples by ship to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. While he remained behind along to pray, night fell and arose. There was a storm in the sea. After the disciples had rowed against the wind most of the night, remember, the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, and they were afraid, thinking that they were seeing a spirit. But when Jesus told them to be not afraid, he reassured them. After Jesus entered the ship or the boat, if you remember the story, the wind ceased, and they arrived to land safely. What are you saying? I'm asking, what is the spiritual and the practical application to this story in relationship to us today for people of color? We are taught to go through certain, what we call social constructs in life, certain hoops that we have to jump, and certain expectations that we have to achieve to make us feel that we're worth or we're worthy or we have accomplished. I'm suggesting now more than ever, the church, we as believers, need to do the work of faith by imagining or reimagining new ways to move forward and look at new concepts and possibilities. What are you saying? Your pastor here, Brother Donnell Howard, he has this vision, and I saw it on, I don't have Facebook, but y'all know what I'm talking about. I was looking at my job's Facebook, where you all last week or 2 weeks ago, you had the opportunity to go back over there to School 11 or 42nd in Millersville Road, and he unleashed, or y'all uncovered, this ideal about an educational center. Hovey Street, you are part of that. God is trying to take you to the other side. Can I get a witness? Although, Brother Avery, the money might seem weak, but we serve a God that's able. And I believe it starts with a vision and an ideal that we have. You got to see it before it happens. And so I'm asking you to pray for our preacher. But what's so cool about this thing is that Hovey Street will be the first church and the Church of Christ that have done anything like this in the city of Indianapolis. And I'm saying to you, Hovey, don't get tired. There may be some storms. You may not be able to see it. You may not have the finances or the fortitude or the resilience. God has you in the grip of his hand. What's on the other side? Waiting for you. Let's go to the text. And there are three things that I want us to look at here in this text right here. And you might want to write this down just real quick. I want to talk about, if you get out of the boat, you got to deal with the burden of getting out of the boat. That's point number one. Point number two is that in order to get out of the boat, or what's holding you back, or what's causing you to be stuck, you got to learn how to deal with the barriers. Because what I found out, if you learn to deal with the burden and the barriers, you will receive a blessing. I was in a church a couple of weeks ago, and I made that point, and that whole church went crazy. Y'all better wake up, Hovey Street. The ideal here is that we're in a safe space. Hovey Street is a safe space. It's like a boat. And Hovey, you've been here, what, 86 years? Something like that? It's time to get out of the boat. And time to reimagine and to do the work of faith. The Bible said faith without works is dead. And so the ideal is, how do we do this work? I serve a group of young men, and it's through Love and Action. And Sherry's here today, and she deals with a group of young men that comes out of reentry programs, and they come back to the community, and they need certain skills to help them. And the ideal is to bring them into a safe space and reimagining their lives, to teach them how to be better men and how to parent their children. The ideal here is that Sherry, she reimagined that in order for me, that I'm a called believer, and being a called believer, I got to do something different. I got to step out on faith. Are y'all following me? And so what we do, we try to teach these young men, in spite of your felony or your misdemeanor or the mistakes that you've made, God has a plan for you if you're willing to do the work. You know what I found out? That the reason why a lot of us are not successful in these processes is because we don't want to do the work. My grandson just texted me, and bless his heart, he's 27 years old. I'm a grandfather of 3, a great-grandfather of 4, and I try to teach him constantly, son, if you want anything in this life, you got to do the work. Text me and talking about Brother Avery, he needs $1,000, but don't have a job. Am I talking to anybody here this morning? I'm talking about my folk. Trying to hustle me because I'm 65 years old. Don't you know I've been around the block 5 times backwards? And then he's going to send me a text, well, they said I got an apartment, but I start my job in 3 weeks. And I'm trying to figure out, how do you have an apartment and you got a felony? What? I'm just talking about my folks. Son, I'm trying to take you to the other side, but you're not listening. I'm not new to this game. I know how this game works. And so what I'm saying here in essence is that we need to teach our young people, in order for you to have fruit, you got to do some work. Am I talking to anybody here? And I know if Tony heard me talking about this, I'm saying his name, he would have a fit. But what are you saying, Brother Holland? You all are not the only folk, grandparents and parents that have these problems dealing with our young folk. But then on the other hand, I got a grandson that's doing the work. I want to talk about both sides. That's doing the work and that's really making a difference in his life and in society. And so when you look at this text, the Bible said immediately, and I want you to walk with me, and I do this about 15 minutes. It said Jesus made the disciples to get in the boat and to go to the other side. And when he dismissed the crowd, and after he dismissed the crowd, he went into the mountain to pray by himself. And then later that night, he was alone, and the boat, when he sent them out there, the boat was already a considerable distance from the land. And it was being beat because of the waves were against it. There are some things that are against us because of the color of our skin, because of the zip codes that we live in. There are some systemic things that are against us. And we as the church, we need, this is my opinion, we need to start confronting these things that are against us. Can I get a witness? Well, the first idea is the burden that we have to carry. And we do know that burdens sometimes they're difficult and they're unpleasant. Some of us, we're dealing with the burden of finances. Can I get a witness? How many of you are sitting right here right now and trying to figure out how you're going to pay your rent? How you're going to get food on the table? How many of you right now that are sitting here is scheming in your head on how to take advantage of a situation because you don't want to do the work? Some of you are burdened with your elderly parents or some of your grandchildren. Are y'all following me? And so the ideal, God, in order to get out of this boat, there are some burdens that we have to deal with. Can I get a witness? There are burdens that we have to deal with, but Jesus said, let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, also believe in me. Because in my Father's house there are many mansions. God has prepared something, but even deeper than that, he said, come unto me, that if you're heavy and burdened, and he said, I will give you rest. And so the ideal here is trusting and walking by faith and recognizing that there are going to be some burdens that we deal with. And you know, burdens has a psychological effect on us, a physiological effect on us, an emotional effect on us when we're carrying something heavy. How many of you ever go work out and lift weights? Okay. How many of you in here been pregnant and had to carry a baby for 9 months? The burden around that whole process. How many of you got somebody pregnant and you was told that you were the baby daddy, and all of a sudden you found out, I got to deal with this situation because I'm married? Am I talking to anybody this morning? Dealing with the burden. But if you deal with the burden, the point is there's something on the other side awaits you. The Bible said shortly in verse number 25, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And that's what's so cool about this ideal, is that Jesus, he can do anything when he gets ready. I was talking to a brother a couple of weeks ago, and he said, boy, y'all kill me with this Jesus and this miraculous stuff that he can do anything. And boy, y'all should have heard that conversation what I had with him. He said, and you're a cussing preacher too. And I said, I defend what I believe in, God dog it. But anyway, and I'm going to leave that one alone. But anyway, the Bible said that he went and walked on the lake, and when the disciples saw him walk on the lake, they were terrified. It was a ghost. But not only will you have the challenge of burdens to get to the other side, you will be challenged with barriers. Barriers or some type of obstacles or something that limits us from getting to the goal that we're trying to face or trying to achieve. They're like blockades, and they're like roadblocks and fences that we have to get around. They're like detours that we have to go through. And like I said about burdens, barriers have similar physical barriers. There are emotional barriers, and there are psychological barriers. Let's kind of talk about them just for a moment. Physical barriers that we deal with. Hovey Street is dealing with a physical barrier right now. There's a building over there with 40,000 square feet. Are y'all following me? 40,000 square feet, and it needs to be gutted out. Well, just like that building, some of us needs to be gutted out too. There are some things that we are carrying that are very heavy, and it needs to be gutted out. There are some childhood issues that we're dealing with. Here we are, here you are, here I am, 65 years old, and I'm talking about something that my mother should have done or should have done when I was 5 or 6. Needed to be gutted out. Can I get a witness? And so there are some physical barriers that we deal with that weighs us down, that keeps us awake. They're physiological barriers that keeps us awake, causes us to have high blood pressure, causes sleepless nights. Can I get a witness? Causes us to have stinking thinking because we cannot carry the weight, and we refuse to step out of our comfort zone. But not only are there physical barriers, there are emotional barriers. I can imagine the emotional toll that it has on Pastor Howard and the leadership of this church. How in the heck are we going to pay for this building? when my members are having problems with taking care of their own responsibility. Am I talking to anybody this morning? Emotional barriers, which leads to certain type of mental disorders, depression, anxiety. Oh, yeah, anybody know what I'm talking about? Sometimes it even leads to psychosis because of the emotional turmoil that's going on in our head. Can you imagine Peter, James, and John when they seen the storm and they thought it was a ghost? And when they were in the storm and they saw Jesus and they thought it was a ghost, the emotional trauma that they were going through? How many ghosts do you have in your life? How many spirits that you're wrestling? Hovey Street, help me now. That you're wrestling with in your life. Emotional. And that's because they saw Jesus and they thought it was a ghost and they could not deal with the storms. But not only is it a physical, it's emotional, physical, but it's psychological too. I remember many years ago pastoring a young pastor up in Muncie and Anderson working with the church, and I did not know that the church was so jacked up when I was in my 20s. Psychological problems that people were dealing with within church systems and congregations, where there was alcoholism, incest, depression, domestic violence. All of these things were going on. What Brother Howard is trying to do is to create a space in addition to the church. We can worship here, but we can do the work over there. Can I get a witness someplace? God is trying to take us to the other side. Because a lot of our people in this community, 46218, have these issues that we're dealing with. And I'm just so excited that Hovey Street is being one of the pioneers that began to do this work. And so, but not only do we have barriers from a psychological or a emotional or a physical, we have systemic barriers. How many of y'all live in America? You got systemic barriers that are designed specifically for us and a group of people to keep us stuck in these processes. I never thought I would see the time that myself as an upstanding citizen, and I'm driving doing the speed limit, and I see the red, white, and blue. Are they red, white, and blue lights? And I start I have these panic attacks, knowing I haven't done anything. But there's a narrative that's been created that we have to deal with as people of color. And that's just one systemic barrier. I'm talking about the disparities of economic and wealth that we have to deal with. The opportunity of jobs and housing and education that we have to deal with constantly. And so the ideal of the church was a sacred space for us to come and worship and to get our shot on. But now as we move into the 20th, 21st century, we got to figure out how to do the work more effectively. And this is what Pastor Howard is attempting to do, to make a difference and to close the gaps of disparities. The barriers that we have to deal with. I remember when I first preached this sermon in the early day, I talked about, you got to get out of the boat and be saved. But then as you grow and develop, God begins to show you at a deeper level what's really going on with us as a group of people and what we have to deal with and what we have to figure out to keep propelling us forward. We got to do the work, church. Doing the work is just not coming to church on Sunday morning and singing a song and going through the items of worship, giving your tithes, and then saying amen and go home. But doing the work is making an impact on the community where we live and where we serve. But not only are there burdens when you get out of the boat, there are barriers. And the Bible says, but Jesus immediately said unto them, take courage, don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come on the water. Jesus said, come. And I maintain the position in that space, there's a vacant space just for you in the unknown. There is a vacant space just for you in the unknown. Well, maybe I should say it this way. There's a vacant purpose for you in the unknown. There is a vacant opportunity for you in the unknown. Are y'all following me? Something is out there in the atmosphere waiting for you to meet it. That's on the other side of your stuckness. It's right there in the Bible. It says, Peter said, bid me to come on the water. He gave him the permission to come. Well, where was he going? But before he got to Jesus, what space did he step in? The challenge with us as the church and as people, we're fearful of the unknown, the ambiguities of life. Throughout the Bible, you see the faith walk of ambiguity in these sacred spaces. I call them liminal spaces. Liminal spaces is when we step through one space, meaning like that door, we leave this space, we go into the community. Maybe you're not understanding that. Liminal spaces are when you leave childhood and you step into adulthood. Liminal spaces is once you was a girl, but now you're a woman. Liminal spaces is when Paul said, when I was a child, I thought it. Y'all follow what I'm saying? I'm talking about spaces that are vacant, specifically with your name on it. But you got to be willing to deal with the burden and the barriers. Am I talking to anybody this morning? There's a vacant space. That car that you want, it's sitting right up there on 96th Street. Can I get a witness? That house that you want, it's sitting right down the street. That job that you want, it's vacant. How many for hire signs that you've seen in the community? They're vacant, and they're waiting for you, and they got you, it has your name on it. When Peter said, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come on the water, Peter saying, I am applying for this position. I don't know where it's going to take me. I'm a fisherman, and I've been fishing for 30 years, and I've never been in a situation like this. I've got the skills and the education and the expertise, but I need a little help. Because I know if I get out of this boat, I'm going to step into some uncharted waters to bless my soul. And so the ideal here, Jesus said, come. And so Peter stepped out of his fears into his future. Can I get a witness? He stepped out of his depression into deliverance. His anxiety to insurance. Are y'all following me? Out of his doubt. Oh, y'all. The ideal here is he said, come. The Bible said, Peter stepped out of the boat, and he stepped out and he started walking on the water. Stand up, church, just for a few minutes. We're going to have an exercise, and I'm going to let you go. Jesus said, come. That's what he's asking us this morning, to come. To get out of your comfort zone. because there's something on the other side that is specifically waiting for you. Are you following me? Waiting for you and the next person, waiting for you. But in order to, when you get out of the boat, you're going to deal with some burdens. You following me? Some burdens, some things that you're going to have to carry. And then there's some burdens that you're carrying you're going to have to release. But not only burdens you'll be dealing with, you got to be dealing with some of the barriers. And many of these barriers that we're dealing with is all in our head, the way that we think and the way that we perceive our reality, this negative self-talk that we have. What is the spiritual application here? With all of his experience, and I'm quite sure he caught some good catfish and some snapper and some, y'all follow what I'm saying? He had these skills or whatever it may have been, but here was a situation that he had never dealt with. What are you saying? If you trust yourself, that's all I'm saying. If you trust yourself and whatever this gravitating pull that's in your heart to make an impact in your life and society, Jesus or the resources, which Jesus was the resource. The resources is standing right there. Oh boy, that's good preaching right there. Jesus is considered the resources. Can I get a witness? The resources may be finances. The resources may be clarity. The resources may be networking with other folk. Jesus, the concept here is just it is a spiritual allegory trying to teach us from a physiological and an emotional standpoint of view that there's a pull on your life. And God is expecting for us to step into this vacant space. And in this vacant space, there are resources waiting for you to grab onto. Jesus said, come. And Peter came. And as he began to come, the resources touched this doubt. The resources touched this insecurity and cleared up his eyes. Are y'all following what I'm saying? There are resources out there for us. And we got to be able to deal with the burdens and the barriers. Because if we deal with the burdens and barriers, we experience the blessing. What's on the other side? The blessing is on the other side. God is standing there. And he's waiting for us to step out there in faith. And if you begin to sink, that's all right. Jesus still have you in the palm of his hand. Brother CJ, as I close this message, I'm asking you to come up and select me a song, because if I was in the Baptist church, I would say the doors of the church are open. Brother Ron prayed and said, God, come on up in this place. You're just using me as a vessel. We need God up in this place. We need God in our resources. We need God when we can't deal with the emotions and the psychological traumas of life. I don't care what the world will say, and there's a lot of folk that are denouncing the church and the ideal of Christianity, but I believe that there's a God somewhere. There's a God that sits high and looks low. There's a God that is breathing through you right now, and because you're able to breathe, it's because God is allowing it. And I don't care what the world say. What he's given to us, what he's given to me. The world can't take it. And so what are you asking us to leave with today, Brother Holland? These three ideals. And it's anchored in this concept. There's something on the other side. For me. There's something on the other side, but you got to deal with the burdens, the barriers. And if you do the work, the creative work, you will experience the resources, the blessings. Just like Peter asked Jesus, if it's you, bid me to come. I'm asking you this morning to come to the Lord as they prepare for us with this song that they're singing and they're kind of humming right now. Asking you to come, to step out of the boat, to deal with your barriers, or to deal with your burdens and your barriers. And we all have them. I'm asking you to come. Even though the winds are blowing, I'm asking you to come. Even though